will understand how important this vote is. We're going to have a vote, as we've indicated, on this continuing resolution to strip out the mean-spirited amendment that they have in it, take it out, put what's already passed here by a substantial majority. I note the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll of the Senate.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
The senator from Utah.
I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection, so ordered. The senator from Utah is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment, I sent an amendment to the desk that's an important amendment. This amendment will constrain the growth of this domestic spending program. My amendment is fairly simple. It tightens the nexus between TAA benefits and actual jobs lost because of trade. It does this by changing the eligibility criteria from one that only requires that trade, quote, contribute importantly, unquote, to job loss for a more restrictive criteria that the job loss be, quote, substantially caused, unquote, by trade. Under the current program, a worker only has to demonstrate that imports from or shifts in production to a foreign country, what normal folks would call the ordinary course of business, quote, contributed importantly, unquote, to their job loss. So what does, quote, contributed importantly, unquote, actually mean? Well, the TAA program holds that the contributed importantly standard is met if trade is a cause which is important but not necessarily more important than any other cause of the job loss. That does not sound like a tight nexus to me, certainly not a tight nexus to trade to me. And believe me, these fears are not theoretical. Let me give you a real-life example. I'm sure by now everyone here is familiar with Solyndra, the now bankrupt solar firm that was lauded by President Obama as the poster child for his stimulus and green jobs plan. Well, it turns out that now that Solyndra is in bankruptcy, many of its employees are applying for job training benefits through TAA. To fully understand this lunacy, let's take a look at recent history. Here's how Vice President Biden described the administration's ill-considered plan to direct over $500 million taxpayer dollars to loan guarantees for Solyndra. Quote, "The Recovery Act is working, and you're going to see it work right on that site," unquote. Quote, "The loan to Solyndra will allow you to build a new manufacturing facility and with it almost immediately generate 3,000 new well-paying construction jobs. And once your facility opens, there will be about 1,000 permanent new jobs here at Solyndra and in the surrounding business community, and hundreds more to install your growing output of solar panels throughout the country," unquote. Well, that didn't quite happen. Instead, the firm failed, potentially taking over $500 million taxpayer dollars with it, and those, quote, "permanent new jobs," unquote, well, not quite. The workers are all unemployed because their, quote, "permanent," unquote, jobs no longer exist. It gets worse. According to the Wall Street Journal, the stimulus loans themselves were a major cause of Solyndra's bankruptcy. Here's the headline: "Loan was Solyndra's undoing." Let me just point to this chart here, this first chart, where it says government loan was Solyndra's undoing. In selling the $500 million loan to Solyndra, Vice President Biden made it clear that these were the jobs of the future, saying, and I quote, "We are journeying in a sense closer and closer to the sun, to a more solar-powered America. And as we do, we're leaving a shadow of a less efficient, more damaging past behind us," unquote. We all know, or should know, what happened to the arrogant Icarus when he flew too close to the sun. So despite the Vice President's exhortations, what happened to Solyndra? Solyndra is set to become an even bigger drain on our taxpayers. How is that possible? Through the magic of TAA, of course. It turns out that the now unemployed former Solyndra employees have applied for trade adjustment assistance. The irony here is profound. The administration is now considering whether to grant these Solyndra workers, because competition from China, quote, "contributed importantly," unquote, to their job loss. Well, they want to determine whether to grant to these Solyndra workers TAA benefits. Now, that's just ridiculous. Frankly, here's another Wall Street Journal article entitled, "Solyndra was always likely to fail." You can see what a beautiful plan it was with all of your taxpayer dollars. In a letter to the editor in the Wall Street Journal, the CEO from another solar company, Tech Solar, explained that everyone in the solar business knew that Solyndra's business model wouldn't work and their solar technology was too costly. That didn't stop the White House from giving this company a $535 million taxpayer loan, money that's basically gone now. This was despite the fact that the government's own analysts accurately predicted months ago that Solyndra would fail in September. Well, it did. And look at that beautiful building, built with taxpayer dollars. It's pretty hard to not admire it, to be honest with you. The fact that TAA benefits are even being considered for Solyndra shows how tenuous the nexus between job loss and trade can be, and workers can still get these expanded benefits on top of unemployment insurance. How can Solyndra workers get TAA when the business collapsed due to a bad business plan and an ill-conceived loan of taxpayer money? What was the cause of Solyndra going under? China imports under the current TAA program, however, might be construed by ambitious Department of Labor bureaucrats to have, quote, "contributed importantly," unquote, to Solyndra shutting down, despite the fact that the primary cause was the business model and the government's intervention. This needs to stop. We can do better. If we're going to continue to fund this domestic program, let's at least make sure that its benefits go to those workers whose job loss is actually caused by trade. That is what this amendment will do. It will return the TAA threshold standard to the, quote, substantial cause, unquote, level. It would require that trade would have to be a, quote, substantial cause, unquote, of the work dislocation. This standard was included in reforms advocated for by President Reagan that were included in the Bipartisan Omnibus Reconciliation Act of 1981. That Deficit Reduction Act included the largest package of spending cuts in history at that time. President Reagan had noted the unfairness of treating one class of workers who lose their job due to foreign competition better than his neighbor who lost his job due to domestic competition. So he tightened the threshold criteria to be eligible for the TAA program. By returning to the narrower TAA threshold, this amendment would put reasonable constraints on the program to prevent it from expanding to another out-of-control spending program like Solyndra. So I ask my colleagues to support this amendment because I think it makes sense. There's no question it will save taxpayer dollars. It will make people act more honestly with regard to the use of taxpayer dollars. And in the end, I think we'll work a lot better than the current approach that my friends on the other side would like to have. Mr. President, I notice that the distinguished senator from North Dakota is here, and I'll yield the floor.
I thank my colleague, Mr. President.
The senator from North Dakota is recognized.
Mr. President, I'm here to speak about disaster aid and the acute need we have in my state for assistance to deal with the disaster that occurred earlier this summer in Minot, North Dakota. Mr. President, these are pictures from the valley in Minot, North Dakota. North Dakota is constructed on two hills with a valley in between, the Souris River flowing through, and we have just had the worst flood ever in history, and by a long margin. Yesterday, the Corps of Engineers was in to see me. They tell me they calculate this is a 430-year flood. That is, a flood of this magnitude would only come every 430 years. Certainly, it is far beyond anything we have ever seen in recorded history. They say the volume in this flood was 3 times the previous record. The volume of water, 3 times the previous record. Mr. President, these are just a handful of the homes in Minot that were inundated. 4,000 families lost their homes. And these are modest middle-class families, homes that averaged $160,000 or $170,000 in value, and yet they are devastated. And they're devastated because all they're eligible for is FEMA assistance. As the distinguished occupant of the chair knows well, FEMA was never designed to be a standalone program to recover from disaster. FEMA was designed to work in concert with insurance programs, homeowners insurance, flood insurance. In this case, Mr. President, with a flood, homeowners insurance doesn't help you at all. You get nothing on your homeowner's insurance. So then the burden falls to flood insurance. Mr. President, in this entire town of 40,000 people, there were less than 400 flood insurance policies. Some may say, well, why didn't they have flood insurance? That's a reasonable question to ask. The answer is very simple. No one thought they needed flood insurance. Flood insurance was not required because they were behind a levee that was supposed to protect against a 100-year flood event and actually something more than that. In addition, new dams since the last major flood have been built in Canada to prevent such flooding. In fact, dams that were in part paid for by the United States. So, Mr. President, there was no reason for people to believe they needed flood insurance. And as a result, very few had it. The bottom line is the most these people can get who have had their homes destroyed, believe me, these homes are destroyed. Most of the 4,000 families that lost their homes had 10 feet of water on their homes for weeks. I've been there, I've seen these homes, I've smelled them, and it is horrific. To restore these homes, you have to take them down to the studs and start over again with $30,000 at the most. Mr. President, if you're a young couple starting out and you have a $170,000 home and you have a $160,000 mortgage and the house is destroyed and it costs $140,000 to rebuild and you've got $30,000, you got a big problem. Or maybe you're like my cousin and her family who had just sold their home and then it was flooded, but it flooded before closing. So guess what? They'd gone and bought a new home because they'd sold their existing home. Then their existing home is flooded. And, of course, the person never goes to closing. So now they have two homes. Now they have two mortgages. Mr. President, this is a neighborhood of middle-class and lower-middle-class families. And they are devastated. And the question is, are we going to help? In the past, we have. In Katrina, we not only provided FEMA disaster funding, we also provided CDBG additional emergency funding. That's precisely what we did in the 1997 flood in Grand Forks, North Dakota, 500-year flood. We provided additional CDBG funding. In fact, to that town alone, we provided over $170 million of CDBG additional emergency funding to help deal with a catastrophic situation there. We've provided much more than that to Katrina victims. So what we're asking for here is not something that's unprecedented, not something that hadn't been done before, and it is absolutely needed. Mr. President, this is a headline from the Fargo Forum, the biggest newspaper in our state, about what was happening in Minot, North Dakota. 11,000 people forced out of their homes. May not sound like many in a state like California and New York, but in North Dakota, that's 1/60th of the entire state population. That's over a quarter of the population of this city, Minot, North Dakota. The rising Souris moves up evacuation time. 11,000 people forced out of their homes, and when they came back, they found an absolute unmitigated disaster. This headline that ran in the Minot Daily News on June 22nd of this year says it all. Projection, devastation. Minot residents evacuate as historic rise in Souris River approaches. Mr. President, this shows some of the preparations as people tried to get out of town and out of these homes before it hit. And then the headline further headline on June 21st, it's a sad day. It's a sad day because the crest was increased in 48 hours by 10 feet. In other words, the city was protected to a certain level, and then Canada lost control of their major reservoir, lost control of it. Their premier told our governor, the floodgates are wide open, there's a wall of water coming your way. And indeed, there was. And they increased in a 48-hour period the projection of how high the water levels would be by 10 feet. There is no way humanly possible to build up defenses by 10 feet in 48 hours. Cannot happen. There's no possible way. Miles and miles of levee. Can you imagine trying to build that up 10 feet in just a matter of hours? Mr. President, it's a sad day. It was a sad day. And here's the result. Flooding, massive flooding, flooding that represented an unusual flood in the sense that usually when you have a flood, the water comes and the water goes. In this case, the water came and the water stayed. And, Mr. President, this is downtown Minot, North Dakota. This is home, by the way, to one of the two Air Force bases that are home to the nation's B-52s. It is also the home to 150 Minuteman III missiles that are an important part of the deterrent of the United States. And you can see this downtown area was devastated by floodwaters, and a flood that, as I say, came and stayed, and stayed, and stayed, and stayed, and stayed. And here you can see rooftops picture taken by Brett Miller of the North Dakota National Guard flying over Minot, North Dakota. I've been to the schools that have been flooded, and 2 of them absolutely destroyed. Absolutely destroyed. They've got to be rebuilt. You can't possibly rehab them in any kind of cost-effective way. But you can see, in many cases, all you see is the roof, because a majority of the 4,000 homes that were destroyed had 10 feet of water on them, and for weeks and weeks and weeks. Many of these homes had 6 to 10 feet of water on them. And anybody who knows what water can do when it sits and is there for weeks and you come back, you've got mold everywhere. And the only possible way to get it out is to take the house down to its studs. Mr. President, let me just close on this photo from June 24th of this year. Again, the Minot Daily News headline, "Swamped." And indeed we were, absolutely swamped. Water starts to inundate the valley. The Corps says service flows to double by Saturday. These are the kinds of headlines that people were coping with in Minot, North Dakota. This devastation will not be addressed for months to come. People are already moving into temporary FEMA trailers, and those FEMA trailers, which are welcome because without them people would have no shelter, but it should be understood those trailers are going to have a tough time against the North Dakota winter. And the people living in those trailers are going to have a tough time in a North Dakota winter. And so we need help. And we need, yes, we need to replenish the FEMA fund, absolutely. But more than that, we desperately need additional emergency CDBG funding. That's what was used effectively in Katrina. That's what was used effectively in the floods, the horrible floods that hit Grand Forks, North Dakota in 1997. And we're asking our colleagues to do what we have done for them. In disaster after disaster, we stood with them, we joined with them, we supported them. And we're asking that for our people at this time. Senator Hoeven and I have an amendment for $1 billion of CDBG funding. We have markup occurring in Appropriations Committee right now, and I understand they're going to agree to $400 million, but that's nationwide. The need in North Dakota alone is $235 million. That according to our state's governor. The need for emergency CDBG funding in my state alone is $235 million. The Appropriations Committee is about to agree to a level of funding nationwide of $400 million. Mr. President, there is a chasm between the need and the resources available. We're going to have to do better than this, Mr. President, or these 4,000 families in North Dakota that have had their homes destroyed are going to have a pretty miserable Christmas and a pretty miserable New Year. Mr. President, we're better than that. We've proven it repeatedly. I hope we're able to prove it again. I thank the Chair and yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll of the Senate.
Mr. Akaka.
Senator from North Dakota.
I ask that we
put off the quorum call.
Without objection, senator is recognized.
Mr. President, I'd ask unanimous consent that we charge time during a quorum call equally between the two sides.
Without objection, it will be so determined.
I thank the chair and again note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk call the roll of the Senate.
Mr. Akaka.
President, I ask unanimous consent that further proceedings in the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection, the senator is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have an amendment which I'll be speaking to in just a moment. First, may I ask unanimous consent that an editorial in the Arizona Republic from September 21st by Robert Robb, the subject of which is Obama debt-cutting plan fails to tell whole story, be inserted in the record at the conclusion of my remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. Mr. President, the amendment that I'll be talking about has been filed. It's amendment number 645. But before I describe that amendment, which I believe and hope that we'll be able to vote on when we have our series of votes later on this afternoon, I just wanted to respond to one thing that the leader said in remarks after lunch. He was talking about the continuing resolution, which we believe will be coming over from the House of Representatives later on today. And that continuing resolution, of course, has funding for the various disasters which have befallen various parts of our country. The leader has indicated, I think, that he's going to be attempting to amend that House product with an increase in that spending. And he asked the question rather rhetorically, why aren't those senators who have disasters in their states willing to vote for his increased spending amendment? And then he answered his own question saying it's all politics. Now, Mr. President, first of all, as you know, we're not supposed to ever question the motives of fellow senators. And I'm sure that isn't really what the leader had in mind. But I would suggest to the leader that it's not politics that causes people to vote against his amendment. If it were politics, they'd be voting for his amendment. Those members that have disasters in their states, he would say, surely you want even more money so that you can be sure to cover all those disasters. And if it were politics, they'd probably be voting yes. I suggest to you that the reason that they're voting no is because of principle. First of all, because there's plenty of money in the House continuing resolution to cover all of the disasters that have already occurred and those that could be anticipated over the course of the next 7 or 8 weeks, which is the period of time covered by the bill. And secondly, that we should never spend more money than necessary. I will stand corrected if I'm wrong here, but I do not believe that the Majority Leader's amendment has a calculation of why all of the money that he proposes is necessary based upon emergencies or disasters that have occurred. So I just wanted to make sure my colleagues appreciated that if and when such a vote occurs, at least those people with whom I've spoken are going to be voting on principle and on the fact that there is plenty of money for disasters in there, and there's no reason to put in more money than is needed, especially in our time of a very, very difficult deficit situation. Now, Mr. President, the amendment, as I said, is number 645. And I'll be discussing the contents of the amendment, why I think it should be addressed. Let me just precede that with this point. I think that the bill before us, the TAA bill, actually deserved greater scrutiny than the process allowed. There was an opportunity here for some more fundamental changes in the TAA program than occurred. The only changes are pretty rudimentary, and I don't think that anyone can contend that they will save substantial amounts of money or represent fundamental reform. The process of putting this all together was by people who supported TAA, not people like me who have a real problem with TAA. So it's probably no surprise that the program isn't substantially reformed. Specifically on the TAA training, which is part of what I'm focusing on here, no work was done to reform the training funding to reflect the fact that there are already over 40 programs dedicated to worker training. One of our colleagues, Senator Coburn, has done some great work in this area to highlight the problem. But instead, the substitute just increases overall training funding and does very minimal reform. More broadly, there's little evidence that the TAA programs are actually effective, and that's what I'll speak to with regard to the piece that I'll be eliminating, hopefully, with the amendment I'm proposing. We're going to spend over $1 billion on the so-called enhanced TAA provisions in the substitute and another $7 billion on the baseline program. So $1 billion on the enhanced provisions, $7 billion on the baseline program, and we don't even know whether it actually helps our citizens. I have filed other amendments that I may or may not bring up depending upon what our schedule is, but at a minimum, I would hope that the word of the TAA supporters can be relied upon as we move forward. For example, the substitute is intended to terminate baseline TAA after 2014. But due to CBO scorekeeping, CBO estimates that Congress could actually spend another $7.4 billion for the years 2015 to 2021, years after all of the TAA is scheduled to be terminated. So I plan to work with the CBO to ensure that these savings are actually extracted from the baseline. Now, this amendment that I speak of repeals the TAA for Firms program. It would repeal that as of October 1st of 2011, in other words, the end of the fiscal year. The amendment would only save about $16 million a year, but I think it serves as a test of one's real commitment to reform. You see, I propose eliminating this small piece of the TAA that President Barack Obama proposed be eliminated in his budget. The President's budget recommendations for this year specifically recommends termination of the TAA for Firms program. And I thought, we've all talked about how our constituents keep telling us they want us to come back here and work together to get things done. Here's an opportunity where the Democratic president, a Republican senator have proposed something, and it's an opportunity for colleagues on both sides of the aisle to get together and say, yes, this is at least one program. It's a small one, $16 million, but it ought to be eliminated. What are the reasons for the President's request that this program be dropped? According to his termination, reductions, and savings, this is submitted as part of the fiscal year 12 federal budget. The first point is the resources would be better spent elsewhere, and here's what the President's budget says, quote, "The administration believes it is more effective to direct EDA's funding towards programs that make investments to promote globally competitive regions rather than to assist specific firms that have been harmed by trade," end of quote. The budget also made the point that the centers are too expensive and they're poorly selected. Here's what the President's budget said, quote, "The nonprofit trade adjustment centers that administer the program are chosen non-competitively and have high overhead rates," end of quote. So the first point is the President's budget says, let's get rid of this program. It's not run well, and it's not centered properly on where we should be centered. Second reason for elimination of this proposal is that the EDA's own budget request to Congress for fiscal year 2012 clearly shows that other programs are more effective and less costly than this program TAA for Firms. And I'll quote, "The Economic Adjustment Assistance Program, which is the most flexible tool in EDA's toolbox, and provides a wide range of technical, planning, and public works and infrastructure assistance, and can get money out more quickly and with far lower overhead costs, meaning more help for the communities that need it. The third reason that I propose eliminating this small program is that the TAA for Firms program doesn't require any kind of significant trade impact for eligibility. In fact, according to the program's own website that outlines frequently asked questions, here's what it says. Question: are only firms seriously affected by imports able to participate? Answer: no. We work with a variety of manufacturers, and for some, imports represent only a minor challenge. Regardless of the degree of impact, a firm may be eligible if it experienced sales and employment declines at least partially due to imports over the last 2 years, end of quote. So that's the third problem. The fourth problem: obviously, there are always bound to be some success stories, but the program's 2010 annual report raises serious questions about its effectiveness. For example, and this annual report, by the way, was required by the stimulus bill, it highlights that only 56% of the firms in 2010 actually completed the program. That means a whopping 44% quit for various reasons. The annual report also shows that firms that started the program in 2008 had little marketed success. After 1 year, firms that completed the program had average employment decrease by 10%, an average productivity increase of 11%, which is only slightly better than the Bureau of Labor Statistics national average for the manufacturing industry of a decrease in employment of 13% and an increase in productivity of 4%. After 2 years, program graduates' average employment dropped by 16%, and average productivity increased by 3%, while the national average for manufacturing firms saw employment drop only 12% and average productivity increased by 6%. In other words, after 2 years, firms not in the program were doing better than firms in the program, despite all the money we're spending on it. Fifth reason: while it's just authorization language here, repeal does save money. The TAA for Firms centers will close and its employees will be reassigned. We've got to reduce the cost and reach of government if we're going to prevent fiscal collapse. And that's the primary reason that I'm focused on this program here. It's not a huge amount of money. Under the substitute, the program would be continued at 2002 levels, or in other words, about $16 million a year. But that's money that we don't have to spend, as the President's own budget said, because this program doesn't work well and, in effect, as I'm saying, wastes this taxpayer money. So if we can't eliminate a program like this, a program the administration wants to terminate, one that EDA says could be done with other programs better, that doesn't require any great connection or impact by trade imports, that has a questionable track record with high failure rates and outcomes at least no better than firms that don't participate, then I am greatly discouraged about the Senate's ability to effect any kind of actual reform. So, Mr. President, I urge my colleagues' attention to this. I know some will say, well, we can't make any amendment to this whatsoever, or it won't be accepted by the House. You ask my House colleagues whether they would support this amendment. My guess is they would say they'd be happy to support this amendment. So, Mr. President, I hope we will be able to vote for this afternoon, and that my colleagues will support amendment number 645.
Mr. President.
And Mr. President, I would also ask that this amendment be made pending.
Mr. President.
The clerk will report the amendment.
The Senator from Arizona, Mr. Kyle, proposes amendment number 645 to amendment number 633.
The Senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to come to the floor and join my colleagues who were here just a few minutes ago talking about the importance of funding, robust funding and immediate funding for disaster relief in our country. The leader, Reid, came to the floor to explain the importance of this issue, followed by the senator from North Dakota, Senator Conrad, who has himself helped to lead portions of his state back literally from the brink of destruction several times. So when a member like Senator Conrad speaks, we really should listen. He has been through, but hell and back in parts of his state, and he really does understand what is at stake here. And some members who think they know about disasters and have not really quite experienced them in their state would be well advised to listen to his plea to get this done right now. I want to address three specific statements that have been made on the floor of the Senate by my friends on the other side of the aisle that are, with all due respect, patently false. Leader McConnell came to the floor either last night or this morning because it was reported in the Washington Post and said, quote, "We don't have to worry because, quote, Congress always does what is appropriate when it comes to disasters." Mr. President, I don't even know where to begin to say how false that statement is. And I know that the leader didn't mean to mislead anyone. He just made a comment like, don't have to worry about this. We always do the right thing. Mr. President, I was there for Katrina and Rita. This Congress did not always do the right thing. There are still things that Congress should have done in the aftermath of Katrina and Rita that have not yet been done, and there's a whole list of things that were done by this Congress but 2 years too late or 3 years too late. So let me be very, very clear with people following this debate. Congress does not always do the right thing when it comes to disasters, and we're about ready to make another mistake. And it is so unnecessary and so unfortunate. Number two, there's a disagreement going on about whether this is politics or principle, and I know that our side has said, and we believe there's got to be politics involved because there's no other reason to explain why the House Republican leadership continues to throw a wrench into this when it is completely unnecessary. What is the principle that they're fighting for? If it is a principle, the only principle I could think of is the principle of when things are going smoothly, blow it up. Because that's what they're doing. What do I mean by that? Let me take a minute to explain. As the Republican House leadership knows full well, the Senate and the House have already agreed. We agreed 30 days ago. We agreed before Hurricane Irene, before Tropical Storm Lee, before these storms ever happened. The leadership, Republican and Democratic leadership, agreed in the big fight that we had over the whole meltdown, not of the government, but of the shutdown almost of the economy. We remember that, Mr. President, don't we, that big fight we had? In that negotiation, the leadership of both houses, Republicans and Democrats, already agreed in anticipation that we would be running short of FEMA money because we have been running short of FEMA money now for 8 months. In anticipation of this, they said in that agreement, we are going to carve out an $11 billion approximate pot of money or cap adjustment so that when we come to ask for disaster aid, we won't have to fight again. Why do we like to fight so much? I mean, I can fight, I do fight, but I choose not to. What is the principle the House Republicans are fighting for? It only must be when things are going smoothly, let's blow it up. That's why I'm so frustrated. It's an unnecessary fight to be having. Again, we've already made provisions for $11 billion. So the leader puts a $6.9 billion well below, well within the range of this $11 billion allowance. And lo and behold, the House leadership says, absolutely not. We're not doing that. We're not even going to consider the $6.9 billion. What we're going to do is just continue last year's level of funding, which was inadequate then. That's why we've run out of it. So they're going to take the inadequate level that we had last year before all these storms happened and extend it for 6 weeks and claim victory, and then come back after the fact and require, for one of the first times, not the first time in history, but in one of the few times in history, to then grab back and say, to finish up the disaster money for 11, you've got to go gut a program that's very important to some members, more important some than others, but an important program. The House is insisting that we got $1.5 billion of a program that's creating jobs in Michigan and in other parts of the country. So why are we destroying jobs when we don't have to? So again, it must be the principle of when things are going smoothly, when things are working, when the leadership has actually agreed for the House Republican leadership to just throw a wrench and really, really mess things up. Thank goodness there are 10 Republican senators in this chamber that don't follow that principle of throwing a wrench when things are going smoothly. They follow the principle of common sense and compassion and being forward-leaning when it comes to helping Americans who need our help. Senators Blunt, Senator Rubio, Senator Snowe, Senator Collins, Senator Murkowski, Senator Brown from Massachusetts, Senator Heller from Nevada, Senator Hoeven from North Dakota, Senator Toomey from Pennsylvania, and Senator Vitter from Louisiana, many of whom have experienced disasters in their state in the past and remember those terrible days, or they're experiencing them now. And they said, we don't follow the throw the wrench in the gears principle. We're going to follow the let's get it done principle. Let's get the work done. Let's move forward. Let's stop fighting. And let's provide immediate and robust funding to help our communities. And so they voted across party lines. I've done that before. I've been elected now 3 times. I mean, you can sometimes cross party lines to do the right thing. Find middle ground. So they did. They found middle ground, and we came up with the $6.9 billion package. Now, let me say, to answer specifically the senator from Arizona, who I have a lot of respect for, we did not pull this sum out of the air. This $6.9 billion, which is much more robust than the $2.6 that the House wants to provide, is a much more accurate estimate based on actual numbers given to the Appropriations Committee, which is a committee of authority here, by the agencies who are the agencies in charge of the disasters, from agriculture, from the Corps of Engineers. So our number, the 6.9 that's being ridiculed as just being pulled out of the air, no, contraire. It was given to us by the agencies. The number that came from absolutely nowhere, that has no bearing on any sense of reality today, is the number the House pulled up, which is last year's number, which was the estimate before the storms even hit. So if you want to argue which number is more accurate, please put your money on our number, because you will lose this bet. Our number is based on actual estimates that have already been made of disasters that have already occurred. In fact, it doesn't even, our number, because we don't have the estimates in, we don't even have the estimates yet for Tropical Storm Lee Or for Irene, it was too early. It takes a while for these numbers. So when I say the 6.9 is much better than the 2.6 and more accurate, that's true. Is it the real, actual number that might take us all through next year? Even I can't say that, and I'm the chairman of the committee. I have more information than anybody in here on this. But I can tell you one thing, it's much better than 2.65, and it's much more accurate, and at least it's based on realistic estimates. So when people say when people on my side over here say we don't even understand what the House of Republicans, the Republicans in the House are fighting about, it's the truth. They picked a fight they didn't need to pick. They're arguing over something that was already decided. They are rejecting their own government estimates of what these disasters cost because of what? On principle? What is the principle? The only thing I can think of, and I've said it 5 times, I'm going to say it 6, must be the principle of let's throw a wrench when things are working well. And I think the American people are tired of it. It's exhausting. So we have now projects, if I could show the projects that are stopped. We have a list, here it is, a list that's literally too thick to put into the record, and I'm not going to ask for it to be in the record because somebody will have to stay here like for days and type it in, and I'm not going to ask the clerks to do that, but I want to hold it up so people can see. I mean, this pages and pages and pages of projects that are stopped right now. And I want to say directly to the the House member from Alabama, Adderholt, who's the chairman, my counterpart, there are pages of projects here in Alabama, in his own district, that are stopped. And he is not helping by supporting last year's number for this year's disasters. And I hope that he would rethink and start arguing not for his party but for his state. And sometimes we have to put our parties aside and fight hard for our districts and our state. I've done that before. I think it's the right thing to do. Now, these are pages and pages of projects that have been stopped, okay? They're finished. They're not finished forever, we hope, but they're stopped. Roads, libraries, bridges, talk about jobs. Most of these are small businesses, as you know, Mr. President. There's not any, like, government agency that swoops in to redo all these projects in small towns. They are local contractors that get contracts from FEMA or the Corps of Engineers, and they go to work. They're issuing pink slips right now for these projects. You think that would motivate people? If compassion doesn't motivate you, if moral rightness, you know, if the morality of the situation doesn't motivate you, maybe thousands of jobs would motivate you. That doesn't seem, none of those seem to be working here. I'm running out of enticements. So all these projects have been stopped. Now, will the $2.6 billion that the House is offering start these projects up again? Yes, they will. And their offer that they're put on the table, that they're really pushing us to accept, which we're fighting hard. We don't want to accept it, but we will not shut the government down over this. But we're pushing back as hard as we can without shutting the government down because they keep holding the economy hostage over there, then they hold the government hostage over there. But I'm saying as strongly as I can, yes, these projects will get started up again. They'll go for 6 weeks. And then we'll be back right where we are now, which is no place. So again, when you have a chance to fix a problem, there's already an agreement that it should be fixed. Already the leadership has agreed how to fix it, and there is an allocation of the money set aside. You still can't do it? Why? Because we want to come back here in 6 weeks and have this fight again? How much time is wasted here? Do you know what Tom Ridge said about this, who's a Republican, the first guy, ran the Homeland Security, first secretary? He said, never in the history of the country have we worried about the budget around emergency appropriations for natural disasters. And frankly, in my view, we shouldn't be worried about it now. We're all in this as a country, and when Mother Nature devastates a community, we may need emergency appropriations. And we ought to just deal with it and then deal with the fiscal issues later on. That's former Secretary of the Department that's in charge of this. This was a statement he made last week. Sent Governor Christie, and I spoke with him yesterday on the phone. He said last week, you want to figure out budget cuts? That's fine. You expect the citizens of my state to wait? They're not going to wait. I'm going to fight to make sure they don't do it. Our people are suffering now. They need our support now. We need the support now here in New Jersey. This is not a Republican or a Democratic issue. That is from Governor Christie, a very popular Republican, I might say. And then Governor Bob McDowell from Virginia, another Republican. My concern is that we help people in need for FEMA, for the FEMA money that's going to flow. It's up to them on how they get it. I don't think it's time to get into a deficit debate. Why are we fighting over this? Why does the House Republican leadership think that last year's number that was inadequate last year is good enough for this year when, as my staff just reminded me, we've had 10 disasters, each one over $1 billion this last year? This is Mother Nature. This wasn't caused by some conspiracy of the Democratic Party. This is just what happened. Why do you want people to have to worry whether their money will be there or not when you can so easily fix this? On what principle are you standing? It can't be fiscal responsibility. It's already provided for in the budget. And if this is conservatism, I don't think America likes that. I don't think they will accept that. It's not their vision of conservatism. It's their vision of foolishness. And I also think, as Patrick Leahy, Senator from Vermont, has said many times, many people are starting to think, why is it that some people in Congress rush out to fund programs in Afghanistan and Iraq and never want to debate when we went to war how we were going to pay for that? We just literally did it in 30 days. Nobody even questioned how we were going to pay for it. Literally. I was here. Maybe a few people raised the issue, well, this is going to be expensive, but nobody on the other side did. To go to war twice, and yet after a hurricane, a tornado, we now have to have a knockdown, drag-out, full-fledged debate on how we're going to pay for every single penny before we can give a green light to these governors and mayors and county commissioners. I think it's outrageous. It's unnecessary. And it is so terribly unfair. So I don't know what's going to happen, because we sent a bill over to the House that has $6.9 billion. It's, like I said, it may not be enough, but it is much better than $2.65 from last year. That wasn't sufficient then. We send a bill over. It's a standalone bill. The House could just, if they don't think the number is, if they think the number is too high, take it down a little bit, or tell us they don't think that this item is worth funding. I mean, say something. We could negotiate on that number. It's not written in, in the scripture, but, it's the best estimate we had of what we actually need right now. But no, they won't even look at the bill. They just send us a $2.6 billion on a continuing resolution. So basically, Senate, you just take our old, tired, inadequate number, and we're going to go home, and then you can just shut the government down if you don't like it. Now, what kind of way is that to treat disaster victims? It's no way at all. Now, Senator Hagan just told me she got out of a meeting today. Some of her people are living literally in tents. I know when I went down to Cameron Parish, some of my people were sleeping on open air on concrete. I know what these scenes are. They roll in my head. I remember, unfortunately, have lots of memories about people sleeping on the street, 500 people sleeping under an overpass, waiting for the federal government to provide, or the state or the local government to set up a trailer or rental unit. You know, and again, if we didn't have the provision for this already decided, if this isn't the way we had operated in the past, I could understand it. But everything moves us. The agreement that's already been raised, the precedent of history, the accurate estimates of the disaster, but yet the Republicans want to fight about it. I think it's a bad fight for them to have, let me just say. And it is really a shame. But we're going to do our best to get immediate and full funding. And if we can't, we'll be back here in 6 weeks talking about it again, which is very unfortunate because you can't rebuild Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and Joplin, Missouri, and parts of North Dakota, Minot, North Dakota, and small towns in Alaska and Alabama 6 weeks at a time. You just can't do it. And when we have the money, we have the provision, we have history and precedent on our side, and the need is so great for the Republican leadership to throw a wrench just because they like to keep things stirred up is really a shame. So that's where we are. We're going to do our best. This is what Republican leaders say. This is what the pictures look like on the ground. And, you know, when it's not on CNN every night, people don't really think it's happening. But the fact of the matter is there are fires burning. There's rubble in towns that look like this. The water may have receded from this particular farm, but the damage is still there. The water, I'm sure, has receded from this scene, but this family is still wandering around their lot looking for spoons and forks and things they might remind them of what they once had. And the Republicans have decided, for whatever reason, to just throw a wrench in this big whole thing and make a big fight when it was absolutely not necessary. So with that, Mr. President, we're going to keep working and see what we can do to bring relief to a lot of this misery. Thank you, and I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will